Kea o ke kopo, to ai ka kea te omo ai o. Ne sa hoa kofe, to apo te keano fa, ka keano o koli, I au kama. Iama to ichiara, to anamo, ke hiposio. Kea o ke o a foi nesa, nati somo o ke a fato kofe, kenki kofe. Sio to apa firarapa somo. Which is really a shame, since Kea is such a beautiful language. But how would I know all of this about some archaic, out-of-date language? Mainly because it's a language that I started work on in 2020, and I'm finally at a place in which I'm comfortable in sharing it. In fact, Kea was meant to replace a language I made a while ago called Ofsumir, which, if you want to see, leave a comment. It might take a while though, seeing as I need to rework some stuff. But let's hop right into Kea. For some background, Kea is spoken by the Keate on the planet. Yes, planet of Ae. This is because of the fact that this is one of the first languages in the universe of Ae. As stated in the spoken intro, there was a mass separation of people from the planet of Ae. The gods threw chunks of land into the cosmos, making the other planets that you see in this image. Subject to retconning. With this separation, we get the differences in the languages following Kea. Now let's get on to the phonology of Kea. Kea's consonants are p, p, d, t, j, ch, g, k, q, f, s, sh, ch, l, r, m, n. And the vowels are a, e, I, o. There isn't much allophony, but there is some that adds a bit of spice. E becomes I whenever around an alveolar stop, aspirated or otherwise. And along the same lines, because of the uvular stop, the vowels I, E, and A become U, and O, respectively, whenever following K. Kea also features one instance of sandhi. I mean, it's similar to how it works in English. You know, how only one word does it, and if you don't do it, you're weird. The copula, O, has an epenthetic glottal stop before it when the word preceding it ends with an O, long or short. And this kinda leads us into the clearly defined, but not strict, phonotactics. Simply put, the glottal stop is not allowed at the beginning of words, except O, and the post-alveolar fricative is not allowed at the beginning of words, with no exceptions. And because of the laissez-faire phonotactics, you can end up with words like aatu. Yes, that is a valid word in Kea. Probably one of my favorite aspects of the phonology. Verbs have 2 or 3 conjugations. Listed here is just the first. Verbs conjugate for the simple present, used in, you guessed it, the present tense, the past perfective, used for stative meanings in the past, the imperfective, past or present, used for durative meaning, the perfect, used in verbs having current relevance or that have to do with a current state, and finally, the infinitive, which is used as just that, but also can be used as a method to create a future tense when the verb is preceded by the copula. And now onto my favorite part of the language, nouns. To grasp some concepts that will be important later in this video, let's go over Kea's noun class system. Put simply, Kea nouns have semantic animacy distinctions, meaning that all nouns in Kea have gender, but it's not marked on the noun itself. There are 2 noun classes, animate and inanimate. Most living things, including humans and other high animacy animals, and natural phenomena are included in the animate gender. And the inanimate gender includes some other natural phenomena, all man-made items, and many low animacy animals. Like I stated earlier, the only way you could see the difference between an animate noun and an inanimate noun is the inclusion of the definite and indefinite articles, which, in later dialects, the definite article merges into the noun to create gender marking. And now into the nitty-gritty of nouns. Nouns take either 3 or 4 declensions, and this is the first. Nouns decline for case and number. The cases K declines for are the nominative, used for subjects, the accusative, used for objects, the genitive, used in possessive constructions, for example, my rocks, and the ablative, used when the subject is moving away from something, for example, away from the snakes. Now, the astute and nerdier among you may notice the fact that there is an ablative but not a dative. For those left out of the loop, in most languages, case marking forms a sort of hierarchy. So if a language has an ablative, it's most likely to have a nominative, accusative, genitive, and a dative. So why is there an ablative then? The genitive case in the modern language evolved from a preposition meaning from, but at the same time in history, the words away from were used in conjunction so much that they ended up merging together and making an entirely new noun case, the ablative. There's one small thing though. The genitive can function as an ablative as well. So when do I use the ablative versus the genitive? The genitive is used to convey possession when the noun possessing something follows the possessee. For example, peashi, in which asha takes the genitive to show possession. It is also used on inanimate nouns to show movement away from. For example, somomesha pei, in which pe takes the genitive to show movement away from. But the ablative has a much stricter use. It is only ever used to mean motion away from an object. For example, asha foi chaelo, in which cha takes the ablative to mean motion away from. But it is also used with inanimate nouns in conjunction with an imperative auxiliary to create an imperative meaning. For example, chana mesha peloashi, where pe takes the ablative ending to show instruction to move away from. And along these same lines, the accusative can be used for a myriad of different locative meanings, depending on the verb preceding it. But I won't talk about it much. Instead, let's move on to adjectives. Adjectives are mainly noun-based in Kea, but predicates are fairly common. Predicates are formed by using the infinitive form of a verb. This will later turn out to be the present imperfective or the continuous form, but not yet. Noun-based adjectives take an oblique case marking whenever describing something that's not in the nominative case. Simple. And I think I should take a minute to talk about some emotion adjectives. Emotion adjectives are a brief look into the culture of the Keate. Early in the history of Proto-Kea, the To'a gave the Keate instructions to worship the world around them, as well as the To'a themselves. This led to the phrase, Keate pate o ae alo, meaning more or less that all people come from nature. This concept is reflected in some emotion adjectives, where they would describe themselves as being like some sort of natural phenomena, such as fire, water, stones, or gemstones. And another common strategy is to use those nouns and just inflect them for the ablative. To be joyous is able to be translated as to come from gemstones, a strategy that is fairly common, especially among children. This is really the bulk of the language. I didn't get to cover some things like nominalization, the conditional mood, and the large number of auxiliary verbs, but this is enough information to get you acquainted with the language. Achaea is a language that spends most of its time compromising to create meaning, from using only 4 noun cases to indicate a host of different meanings, to having multiply phonetically identical affixes, leaving a lot of room for analogy down the road. But I think that wraps this up. And Ashamati Rapamachai.